Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, all in crypto here, and today we are going to be talking about XRP and XLM, two cryptocurrencies that hold a big position in my portfolio. And today I want to address the tribalism that I see out there in regards to these two cryptocurrency projects. The communities don't seem to like one another. However, I'm here to tell you that the same people are behind both of these projects, and they're both going after the same market, but in a different manner. And actually this was by design, not default. So first of all, let's start things off with where XRP came from. XRP started its life out in 2012 as Altcoin. Now, Altcoin was famously backed by Founders Fund, which of course is Peter Thiel's fund. Peter Thiel, for those of you who don't know, is the head of the PayPal mafia. In fact, he was the person that rang David Sachs and got him involved in PayPal all the way back in the 90s. And since then, Peter Thiel has been behind founding some of the most influential and important companies that today govern and rule the internet. We're talking about YouTube, we're talking about Stripe, which subsequently was the largest investor in XLM. We'll talk about that in just a second, but Peter Thiel essentially founded Founders Fund and through that invested in Altcoin. Remember, we have OpenAI, also founded by Peter Thiel. Sam Altman happens to be on the board of the Stellar Development Foundation. I bet many of you didn't know that, and that's why we're making this video. So Peter Thiel, essentially through Founders Fund, founded something called Altcoin, which in 2012 launched. And the people behind that at the time were Artur Brutto, Chris Larsen, and of course, the infamous Jeb McCaleb, the individual who was behind Mt. Gox. Not the hack, but the exchange itself. Now, that's how it started off its life in 2012. In 2013, it changed its name to Ripple. And this is significant because, again, Peter Thiel is the guy behind most of the successful companies that govern the internet. And he's already, through PayPal, once changed how money is moved and really money itself. He evolved money and took it digital with the spawn of the internet and Web 2. I believe he's going to do the same thing with Web 3. And he happens to have his fingers in both XRP and XLM. So let's continue with the lineage. Altcoin changed its name to Ripple in 2013. Of course, Chris Larsen and Jeb McCaleb were at the helm of it. And in 2014, there was a falling out, a dispute between Jeb McCaleb and Chris Larsen, as the story goes. And of course, Jeb McCaleb subsequently went on to go and found XLM, which essentially copied the XRP consensus up until it changed to the Stellar consensus. This took place, I believe, in around about 2015. But the narrative is that he fell out with Jeb McCaleb. I think more so he was assigned a different task, because for one cryptocurrency to fundamentally change and be the system in which value is globally transacted is a tall order. And instead, what you've got is two projects trying to do the same thing, but in a different manner, going after a different target audience. We'll talk about the G20's report that was published January this year, where it mentions both Stellar and RippleNet. And it also addresses the market that they're trying to capture being a $35 trillion market and the different sectors within it, one being institutional and one being sort of peer-to-peer and more SME, small to medium enterprises, which I think Stellar is more positioned for, and of course, XRP through Ripple, the opposite. So Stellar, obviously founded by Jeb McCaleb, one of the primary, if not the primary backers of Stellar Lumens. I think they got like 2 billion tokens for it. And remember, at one point, Stellar Lumens had a market cap or a supply of XLM of $100 billion. That was half, that was a decision that was taken. The main backer of the Stellar Lumens project, XLM, is of course Stripe. Now, Stripe was literally founded by the PayPal mafia. The PayPal mafia all over these two projects, and that's significant because they've been so successful having founded PayPal and fundamentally changing money and value itself in essentially going and enabling the largest internet companies today. We all hear the story of Mark Zuckerberg and the basement-esque story of Facebook. Well, actually, Peter Thiel was involved in that. Peter Thiel also gave Vitalik Buterin, I think in 2014, it could be 13, you'll have to check that one, or I'll have to check that one, I'll throw something up on the screen, a £100,000 loan through his grant program so that he could drop out of university and essentially go on and found Ethereum. Peter Thiel's all over this. And as someone that's been so successful in evolving money, digitizing it once, we believe he's doing the same thing today. And the footprints are very evident in the sand. So Stripe was the main investor. Stripe now getting very heavily involved in stable coins. You may wonder, they've not quite linked, or people haven't quite linked that to XLM, but Do your research on this. They were one of the big, or the main backers. I can't quite remember the figure. Was it 3-4 million, something like that, in regards to XLM? And of course, now we get to today where we have XRP and XLM. And they seem to be competing protocols. And I guess in some senses they are, but they're both going after the same market, but different areas of it. XRP being more institutional, commercial, and XLM with partnerships like MoneyGram, so on and so forth, being more peer-to-peer and small to medium enterprises. And combined, I believe they're going to take on a $35 trillion problem, being the remittance market. In doing so, revolutionize finance by putting it all on unified, interconnected ledgers. Now, for anybody that understands the financial system in its current form, certainly when it comes to sending money around the world, it is a nightmare. It is expensive. Through leveraging technologies like XRP and XLM, you essentially go from having to send letters to emails. And the analogy I'm making there is what took place with the internet. We could send information freely in an instant global fashion with the dawn of DLT or Web3. We're going to do the same thing for value. And these projects aren't just going to be responsible for the $35 trillion global remittance market. They're actually going to tokenize value of all forms and potentially fulfill that pedophile vision of being able to pay with anything, anywhere, any time. So for example, you can pay with stocks or whatever it may be. Value is generally going to be unified through these ledgers. So this brings me on to that G20 report that was released this January, so January 2025. It very much confirms a lot of what we're saying here. In fact, it goes as far as to mention both RippleNet and Stellar Lumens in regards to tackling the evolution of money. And in the report, not only does it mention both RippleNet and Stellar Lumens, it also mentions the market that they're going after being a $35 trillion market. Now, this market can be broken down even further, and we'll put the images on screen, into a $16 trillion enterprise share. So that's the share that enterprises have of this market, which Ripple and of course XRP are very well positioned in. You only need to look at a fraction of their partnerships. Then we have a $15 trillion small business sector that XLM is positioned for, but also I would say XRP. So there's a kind of crossover there. And then you have a 3 trillion person-to-person share of this market, making up that $35 trillion. And I believe XRP is more institutionally positioned, and XLM through partnerships like MoneyGram are positioned to essentially service that market. And it's very interesting that, and I'm sure you're following where I'm going with this, they both come from the same investors and the same individuals. Now, isn't that very interesting? And it's amazing how things have progressed since they were founded all the way back in 2012 to today. And actually, people often forget this, but XRP at one point was the second largest cryptocurrency. Obviously, Ethereum overtook it, and I believe it was deliberately stunted to essentially keep people like me and you from investing in it and seeing this picture that we are trying to put together. And people often forget, you know, I live in the West. I'm not in the West right now, as you can see this beautiful view behind me. But people often forget that there's a vast population of the world out there. We're talking billions of people that don't even have access to banking services. And actually, through technologies like XRP, I would say more so XLM, you're going to bring on billions of people into what is increasingly becoming a global system. And these two technologies are going to play a key role in globalizing, unifying, and enabling this internet of value that we are moving towards, highlighted by Wells Fargo. These are two key players. They were destined to be so from the start. So why should you care about all of this? Why does any of this matter? Well, personally, I've decided to invest in both XRP and XLM. They make up a large part of my portfolio, as I said at the start of the video, because I believe they are going to be staple protocols in the coming internet of value. And I think the footprints are in the sands. You have very successful investors behind these projects that have fundamentally changed value and money once already, and they're going to do the same thing with these technologies. They were destined to do so from the start. And I think there's a great value proposition there from an investment point of view. Of course, this is not investment advice. And I think furthermore than that, actually when you look at both of these technically, so you look at the charts, they've put in the exact same pattern, and we've given you our $19.27 price prediction for XRP. I'm going to reserve just how high I think XLM can go. However, I think it's a real dark horse that's going to make a lot of people a lot of money. That's it from me, guys. I'm going to love and leave you all. Hope you enjoyed this beautiful view, and I'll see you all in the next YouTube video. Thanks for watching, everyone.